So, how is everybody today? That good, huh? End of semester blues? No? I mean, just think Christmas is only a few weeks away. What? It's like listening. Oh, it's this magical time of the year where there's no school.
And
So,
everything is so expensive.
well, everything is so expensive these days anyways, you know.
It's gonna be more expensive this Christmas, so.
Yep, well, you know. What are you gonna do? Become poorer, that's what you're gonna do. So, for today, I was thinking we would do maybe a few more Windows form examples. I think that people would appreciate that. Alternatively, we could have time to work on the assignments if people would prefer. What do you want to see, examples or the assignment?
Examples.
Examples, 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 examples?
Yeah.
You're indifferent?
Anything.
Anything? Yeah. All right, so let us let's grab our Visual Studio. Create a new project. Windows Form application. So I thought it might be a fun thing to do, to integrate a little bit of our knowledge revolving around arrays, to see if we could, you know, come up with a form application that, you know, used arrays a bit more directly, so that we can, you know, squeeze in a little bit of studying for the test, the exams. So, let's call this more in class. There we go. Toolbox loaded automatically for me this time. So, before we get to that though, let's do an example with radio buttons. So previously, we had done a, what was the other in-class example we did? It was one of, something, it was dosage. Dosage, right?
Slider bar.
Yeah, that was a, was it? I'd like to do an example that has both a metric and an imperial formula. You know, that way we can like toggle between the metric and the imperial using a radio box. So, you know, but as I'm thinking about it, I think the example on the assignment was the one that had like easy imperial metric. That's okay, we'll figure it out. So let's grab a radio selector. Radio button. Radio button 1. Radio button 2. There we go. So, oh, that's just going to cause problems. So, let's rename this metric and imperial. I suppose we could do something like gas mileage on a car, right? You know, in keeping with our theme of things being too expensive. So, let's grab the formula. Alright. It's relatively simple. Nothing tricky going on. The imperial formula is miles over gallons, which means, of course, the metric will be kilometers per liter. So we will need text boxes for both of our inputs and labels for both of those input boxes and our final result. There's a text box, there's another text box. Where'd my toolbox go? There we are. Label. I always double click to edit, it gets me every time. Distance. Fuel consumed, and then result not yet calculated. There we go. Make sense? So, let's just run this for a moment to make sure everything works. You can see, this is typical radio button behavior. When we select one, it unselects the other, etc. Make sense? So, the next thing we have to do, yeah, I suppose we could, let's just put a button in to make the thing operate, rather than go on like a change condition. I think that makes sense. Why does my toolbox keep going away? This is the same problem I have at home. I can never find any of my tools. It's terrible. Go.
Professor, you add a button as well and you add 3 labels, right?
Yes, I added 3 labels. One to label our first text box as distance, the second to label our second text box as fuel consumed, and the third, which is going to be our output. Yeah. So, since we are well, let's see if we can make those a bit better. Here. So, up to now we've been using default names for all of our components, but let's do that a little bit better this time. In our properties dialog, if you scroll down to the design category, you will find a name parameter. So, there we go. If we modify that, you can see it modifies the name of the thing in here. Can I increase this size of the font here? Maybe. No, I don't think so. Sorry. Modifying it here, you'll notice it automatically not renamed the text box at the top of the properties window. And if we take a look in our form designer, you will see that the name has automatically been changed in this generate code. This is much easier than trying to go in and modifying it yourself manually. So, when I'm doing work of this kind, there's a particular naming convention that I tend to follow, which makes things easier, makes things much easier to work with. So, these variable names, these object reference names, as they currently exist, they tell you what the thing is, but they don't tell you what its purpose is, right? So these are labels, but we don't have any idea what is labeled. If we simply replace these with just distance, for instance, you lose the information of what the component is in the variable name. Now, the variable name is often used without this context of the object type given right next to it. So, my recommendation for naming your variables inside of these forms, and also once we get into similar things in JavaScript and HTML and all of that next semester, my recommendation is to use prefixes. I use TB for text box, LB for label, RB for radio button, BTN for button, and you can think of other ones that are similar and appropriate. But when you pull these values through other code, it makes it much easier to understand what you're doing, right? This is a form of self-documentation. The code is self-documenting in the sense that it tells you what it's, it tells you what it's doing. It tells you what it is. you'll find that if you go and work for a company writing code for a living, that very often the company will have a naming policy with respect to variable names and function names and all of this kind of stuff. And it's often follows a similar line to this. A common one that I've seen in the past is keeping the typing information for the variable included in the variable name itself. Although, the exact way that it gets done, obviously will vary depending on where you are. So let's go through and fix all these names, shall we? So, on the metric radio button, let's call this radio button metric. Radio button imperial. Oh, there we go. Label distance. Label fuel. Text box fuel. Button go. You'll find that with buttons you often give them like a name which is identical with the label on the button, just because it makes it easier to figure out. Hopefully what this does is it saves us the hassle of having to refer back to the designer.cs to figure out what the heck things have been named. Any questions so far? If you're the kind of person who likes to keep a notepad by your computer when you're programming, writing yourself up a quick description of each of these is also a very handy thing to do so that you don't lose the information. And label result. There we go. And you can see, much more descriptive, right? So, let's put the code together now, shall we? So going back to our designer, if we double click on our Go button, we get button Go click, which is obviously our click event. So, as it turns out, this may not be the best example because there's no constant in here, but we can at least report the correct units, right? So, if radio button metric dot, there should be a checked, there we go, gets or sets a value indicating whether the control is checked. So to check if a radio button is checked, that's all we need. Nice and simple, right? So, we can save that for the reporting at the end. Since the formula doesn't change between the two, it makes sense to do it up front. So, float mileage is equal to float dot parse text box distance dot text divided by float dot parse text box fuel dot text. There we go. If this is too long a line, you can always pull those into separate variables on separate lines and then integrate them later on. But, you know, it's neither here nor there. So, if metric has been checked, we wish to report our values in kilometers per liter. So, label result.x is equal to mileage dot toString, that'll work, yeah, plus the string kilometers per liter in metric. It's a capital L for liters, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. Otherwise, well, actually this isn't an otherwise. And I'll explain why I decided not to do it that way. So, one may think, okay, measurements are generally in either metric or imperial. Would we not use an else case here, right? Well, if we write it like this, we have the possibility of adding a third option to our radio box set with only minimally impacting the code that we currently have, right? I know it's like, you know, kind of a auxiliary concern for you guys at this point, but you really can improve the way that you code by planning for future expansion, right? Having one case for each checkbox and not assuming the number of checkboxes on the form in the structure of the if statement allows easier expansion, which makes the future easier and does not seriously impact the easiness of the present. So this is the sort of thing I would recommend doing in this case. So, we simply change to miles per gallon. There we go. Let's run this guy, see how it works. So if I went 100, or let's say 400 kilometers on 30 liters of fuel in imperial, then I have 13.3 kilometers per liter gas mileage. Whereas in imperial, I have the same but in miles per gallon. Make sense? Any questions? Pretty straightforward?
I have a question. What
Yeah.
does that mean, dot checked?
That simply means that the radio button has been checked. So right now, imperial is checked and metric is not, right? So imperial, this value here, Boolean, comes out true, that one comes out false. If I were to check the other button, it would be the reverse of that.
Then, can I use said not checked, dot click or other statements in if condition as in if condition?
Here,
Yeah.
But not in this program, but in other program,
Oh,
can I
certainly.
use already, for example, the matrix dot check instead of check or click or other change things like that?
Yes, this can be used in, other event types, absolutely. Basically, you can use anything in here in any event type, because this is general programming, right? Yeah, in fact, let's do I had an example in my head that I wanted to do, which demonstrates exactly that. It would be useful if the units were indicated here as well, before the user entered any data. So,
I have one more question.
of course,
What is the difference imperial and matrix?
oh,
Because same formula, same answer, same result, you just change the.
yeah, the formula is the same in the case of both. Because I picked a formula that was too easy. I should have done like gravity in imperial and metric or something.
So 1 liter equal 1 gallon?
Well, no. It's just that the formula is the same in both cases, right? Now, so what we could do, we could display in both miles and gallons, in which case we would integrate the conversion rate between miles and gallons. So, actually that seems like a good thing to do. Let's do that one first. So let's change this so that our text, our output result text, gives us results in both imperial and metric, but we enter in either imperial or metric. So, first, we need the conversion rate. Miles per, yeah, you're both listening to me. So, 1 mile per gallon is equal to 0.425144. What's this? 1 mile per gallon is equal to this much kilometers per liter. That is the right, yeah, good. And then, obviously the reverse is the inverse of that. So, if we have miles per gallon, then can I just do plus equals? We'll see. Multiply by 0.52544. There we go. And that will give us kilometers per liter. Let's throw a new one character in there. All right, let's check to see if that works. In imperial mode, distance of 100 miles, consuming 20 gallons. Aha, I need to move my label up a little bit. But you can see, we get both values. Let me just fix my label a little bit. And to do the other one, let's just calculate the inverse. There we go. So the inverse is like so, and that gives us miles per gallon. I guess it's like, it's actually spelled out miles, isn't it? I live in a metric country, so there you go. So there you have it. If we run that, entering 110. Oh, I forgot the new one character. Entering 110 yields 10 kilometers per liter, or 23.52 miles per gallon. I just want to do one more thing to this. I'd like it to change the units on distance and fuel to match whether we are in metric or imperial mode. So let me throw in these labels just to begin with. In our form. Okay, thank you. There we go. Are you gonna load? You gonna do it for me? Designer. There we go. So let's shorten these text boxes up a little bit. Put in a couple more labels. There we go. For this one, distance will be km, name will be label distance units. And for this one, liters, label distance, or what is it, fuel units. There we go. These lined up nicely. There we go. So, here's a question. I want these labels to match the checkbox that's selected at the top of the form. What sort of event should we be using? What action should trigger this change?
If the radio button is clicked, then the label is visible or not visible.
But what is that if statement going inside of?
The toggling of the radio button.
Yes. So, if we double click on radio buttons, you'll see that we get a checked changed. Yes. In fact, I might just delete this, even though it probably is going to throw a fit. But I'm going to do that because, yeah. The name has changed, so I would like that to change as well. There we go. Double click our checkbox. There we go. Now we've got the correct name. So yes, when it has been changed, once again, we check, the checked state of the radio buttons with a couple of if statements. So if, yes, good guess. There we go. The same two if statements up there. Now, label distance units is equal to kilometers. top text, pardon me. Down here, that will be miles. And then fuel units will be in liters. And down here it will be gallons. There we go. Now,
Oh, wow.
not bad, right? Now, I only applied that event to the metric radio box. Why didn't I have to apply it to the other one?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so when I wrote the code, which swaps those labels, right? I only wrote it for the metric radio button. I did not write any code for the imperial radio button. Why didn't I have to do that? As you can see, when I click on imperial, I still get the change.
Because you declare it with the if statement. So basically you even declare it in the metric, but you also said if the imperial dot checked, so it's applied to both of them.
Not quite.
But when it's not checked, so the other will show.
This code only gets activated if the checked changed event fires.
Yep.
That event is only being triggered from the metric box, not from the imperial box.
Yes, so when metric is checked, then it's applied. When the metric is not checked, then doesn't apply, but
Oh, metric collected, it means the imperial button also automatically.
yeah,
Precisely. Yes, precisely so. In this example, we only have two, right? So, when you click the imperial, it unchecks the metric. Note that the name of this event is checked changed. So, it's not, this doesn't activate when the checkbox is initially checked. It activates when the checked state has changed. So, in this case, we get away with it, right? Because, we only have the two options. But, if there were any more of these,
we
right,
have a problem.
we might have a problem.
So if we apply the same rule in, for example, in imperial checked, it will still work, right? So,
Well, let's take a look. Oh, okay, fine, do it that way. I don't know why all my things are going away today. There we go. If the form designer is giving you trouble, just close the tab and reopen it. So if we add an event to the imperial checkbox, copy the code in here, you can see there's been no change. But if we do this, this gives us the ability to add a third checkbox without interfering with the operation of the other two. You can imagine that if you were relying on not providing this material to the imperial checkbox, if you added a third one, you would introduce a bug, and you wouldn't necessarily know where that bug was coming from, right? So, there is one thing, however. I see repeated code on my screen, and I hate seeing repeated code. What should we do? Deleted? Well, in a sense. Write a method. Yes, thank you. Update units. There we go. There we go. And there we go. And now we can have as many things as we want updated the units. Make sense? Any questions? Good. How is the assignment coming along? Good. Are you done? No? Getting there?
40%.
40% isn't bad. So you got like the first question under wraps then? First question, maybe some progress on the second? Good. Good. Cool. Question?
Yeah. So I'm not able to change, I'm slow a little bit, but I'm not able to change the nature of this.
So I called it underscore distance units.
Work?
No, work. I don't know. Maybe I just have magic fingers.
Thanks.
Dr. Moore.
Yes.
2 items.
Oh, oh, so it's
So I didn't know.
the
if you-
square of the height?
Yes, I didn't know if you introduced that intentionally.
No. I didn't.
Okay. Next thing is the simple calculator.
Hmm.
Do we need to account for, even though it's only 2 boxes and then the simple operations, do we have to account for a visualized zero in this case?
I won't be checking for it, but I'll definitely notice if you do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because typically these things build up, right? So that would be something more in the third question, I would assume,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's functioning like a real world calculator.
Well, I mean, what happens if you take a real world calculator and you dip 0 on?
Do you want an error message or you want the thing to blow up?
Well, if you can, if it's possible for you to make your computer catch fire, I would prefer you didn't.
Okay.
You know, because computers are getting expensive, you know? But, nah, it's, you know, I'll leave it to your discretion how you want to handle it. Certainly it is an error. It's not even a, like, this is a problem with the programming language error. This is the user has a problem. It's like the user entered something stupid, so the user should know about it.
Got it, okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Any questions? Or any?
So about the bonus.
Okay.
It's almost like. This is the test. So,
Yeah.
there is two issues. One is when is minus, and then it's, error codes, like, it's okay, because the first number is a part of plus.
Yeah.
But let's say, then, here.
Oh, let's see here.
But the, yeah. I need to put text, read, all text box, and the text box, is a text. And then I split, use this text to using string dot substring here. So number one is minus number two.
So, are you splitting on all operators?
Yes.
So you're probably splitting on this one too.
So.
So you're probably ending up with an empty string here, then the string 1, 1, 1, then the string 1, 2, 2, 3. So this is not, what it's complaining about is that this is not a float, which it isn't.
Here, so I have to strings split 2 times.
So what I would do, I would throw in an if statement before you reach that part, testing to see if the first character is negative, right? And then if it is, save a flag or something, and then just parse the rest of it normally, but apply that this number to turn it negative before you perform this operation. That's what I would do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay, I will try, and then the other one is. After calculated this one, then I started a new calculation with a number, then I want to.
Oh, delete
Yes,
the old?
result, result. How can I?
Oh, just, you have to set a flag.
What?
Yeah, you have to set a flag. Set a flag which tells you that the last operation was